Learn how to use a path in SwiftUI. A path is used to draw any shape that you want, but in this case we're going to use it to create a single straight line as a hand on an analog clock. So to create a path, you simply type path followed by its closure and the variable path. Now you can call that variable whatever you like, but obviously it's easiest just to call it path. We're going to manipulate that variable to tell Swift where we'd like that line to start and end. But before we can do that, we have to give it some space to work within. So we create a frame for our path. In this case, we're just going to use 160 by 160 and represent that using a square on the right of the screen. Now, if you're following along in Xcode, you won't see a square. A frame is simply the representation of the space available to the view. So we've allowed the view to have 160 wide by 160 high. For this example, we're creating a hand for an analog clock. So I'm going to throw on top of this a circle to represent the face of our clock. Now, a path has a series of coordinates that can be called upon to assign the placements for the path. So that starts in the top left-hand corner at 0, 0 and finishes in the bottom right-hand corner at 160, 160. These are X and Y coordinates like you'd find on a Cartesian plane when you're drawing lines as a graph. So we need to set where the path is going to start. So we're going to say to the path, move to 80, 80, which is halfway across the screen and halfway down the screen from 0, 0. Path.move to CG point X 80, Y 80. CG stands for core graphics, and the point, as you'd imagine, would be a point on a graph or a Cartesian plane. Next, we're going to have the path add a line to another point within the frame. Ideally, we're going to move it to the top of the screen at what would be 12 o'clock. This is represented as 80 across our frame and 0 down the frame. So we're not moving down, we're just moving across to the point 80, 0, 80x, y 0. So path dot add line to the CG point 80, 0. Now, if you're doing this in Xcode right now, you'll see absolutely nothing on the screen. This is because the path hasn't been given any properties for its display. So we're going to add a stroke to the line and make the stroke colored red with a style that has a line width of 4 and each end of the line capped as rounded. It's just a nicer look than a rectangular end to our line. Finally, we're going to add the rotation so that the frame can actually be completely rotated around our screen to give the effect of the clock hand being moved around. So dot rotation effect, angle degrees 0. Currently 0 means it won't be rotated at all, but we'll change that later on. So the goal with that line of code is that the entire frame spins around. So now that we've got our path ready, we're going to cut that code out and place it into its own view so we can call upon that path or that clock hand whenever we want it. So we start with a struct clock hand, which is going to be a view, and that view is going to have a body. We'll paste in that code into the body. Now at the moment, this code will create one singular line that's red with a size of roughly 80 pixels. But we want to be able to call upon this clock hand anytime that we want and give it its own unique properties. So in the clock hand struct, we're going to give it a new property called length. So how long the line will be. It's going to be a CG float, which again is core graphics. And the best way to describe a float is a decimal number. Now at the moment, the 8080 is what we'd like to represent as our length. So it'll be across 80 and then up 80. So we're going to replace the CG point for move to be whatever value is typed in as the length. So as you can imagine, if we typed in 100, it would move across to 100, 100, and then up to 100, 0. Now this only works if the frame fits its length. Now the length is currently, let's say 80, which is half of the required space. So whatever length we put in, it needs to be doubled for the frame. So if I put in 100 for the length, then it should double it to 200 to fit the line from the middle to the edge. It's like the radius of a circle. Next, we're going to add a couple more properties for the thickness of the line, which again will be a CG float, and the color of the line, which will be a type color. And replacing the values inside of the stroke, we can now make the stroke whatever color is added as the property, and the thickness of the line being the line width. So if a user types in a larger number, it will make a thicker line, and whatever color they choose will also be made as that line. Finally, we want to have the ability to rotate the line as we see fit. So we're going to have an angle, which will be a double. A double is similar to a CG float. It's simply a decimal number. So we're going to replace the degrees, which is currently 0, with whatever number is placed into the angle property of the clock hand. So now we're ready to call upon our view inside of our clock and create multiple clock hands as we see fit.